Hi, Monica. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Krista. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so delighted to have you. Thank you for coming to the show. My first question is, I always give my guests the opportunity just to do a quick introduction of who they are and what they do. So if you want to tell the listening and watching audience about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am in the business of helping people transform their lives. And my mission in life is help people go into a higher ground and ultimately helping the shift of Earth right here, right now, and try to get as many people as possible to ascension, which is only a huge challenge.
No big deal.
But just a small thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, and you do this in the book that you've just published, which we're going to talk about this, and you lay it out very clearly of somebody on the spiritual path, how they reach that ascension. And it's so important for us to shift our mindset here on earth. So we'll get into the details of that. My second question is, I'm always curious about everybody's early childhood experience with spirituality, religion, or nothing at all. And then bring us forward to what you ground yourself in today, what your practices are, kind of what you believe. So for you, what was that experience like?
I guess I was born very spiritual and with a lot of spiritual awareness, because when I was a very small child, I started asking my parents, where do we come from? What is the meaning of life? I mean, questions unsuitable for small children. And I had the feeling that my home was not here. I will always look at the stars, and I will even ask my father, where do I come from? And I remember very vividly one time, I may have been, maybe 5, 6 years old at the time, so quite small. And I asked that question, and my father said, well, we just took you from under a bridge. You were living with some gypsies, and we brought you home. And I was like, no, I was crying. And he's like, they don't understand me, really. and I had a very good childhood. My parents were wonderful, but still, I always had this, something was missing. And this was not my home. And I could not understand the cruelty of human beings with each other, with animals. I couldn't get it. So I guess I started an early quest on to spirituality and more than anything, trying to understand how things work, the real nature of the mind and the real nature of reality. Because I was not happy with just going to school, and then you will go to university, and then you will marry, and then you have children, and then you will work for life, and then you will just retire. And it's like, this cannot be it. So I began with the Catholic Church in the beginning. That was available and easy because I was brought up in Spain. But quite soon I understood that it was not for me, because the Catholic Church, and I think all churches and religions, they really they corrupted Jesus' message. And they were not faithful to that, to his word, to his real word, to his real work. And I think he was a great avatar incarnated on earth, but not the religion in itself. So I kept on looking, and I read, when I was 14, 15, I started reading like every book I could find on spirituality, transcendence, the nature of the mind. And I continued all those years. And I remember something vividly that made me think, okay, I'm not like most people. Because when I was still at school, this teacher asked all of us, what do you want to do when you grow up? And people will say, okay, I want to become a good architect, a famous architect, or I want to find the ideal partner. I want to start a family. I want to have a big house. I want to be successful with this or that. And when it was my turn, I said, I want to become a wise person and with a big heart. And then everybody was looking at me like, where is she coming from? So I never really felt that I belonged to a group or anything. So I had to continue my quest on my own. it doesn't mean that I didn't try to fit in at some point, because I went to university and studied economics, and I got a master's degree. And then I went to work in London for Prada, and then in Paris for an international business school. I married early. I had a very good material life, good social life, good holidays. We were living in one of the best neighborhoods in Paris. It's everything like most people aspire to in this lifetime. And yet I felt so unfulfilled. And it didn't really matter. All those things were perks, but not really things that will be able to fulfill me inside. So at some point, I wanted to do some research. I took a month off, and I went to do some research in Dharamsala, which is a little town at the feet of the Himalayas in India. And I wanted to understand better the problems and difficulties that Tibetans had to settle down in India in exile. And the problem with their invaded country and so on. So I went there for 3 weeks, and with a surprising turn of events, I missed my flight home. So I ended up staying 3 months. I studied with Tibetan lamas. I received teachings from the Dalai Lama. And then I understood that those people were very similar to me. Their language, and I don't mean Tibetan because I don't speak Tibetan, but their inner language was the same. I resonated deeply with their words and their teachings. And it was fantastic because they provided a very good map of the mind and the ego and how to dissolve it. And they had the same goal that I had, which was enlightenment. And they had an incredible map that could really be very useful for me. So at the end of those 3 months, I went back home. Home was in Paris at the time. And I realized that I could not go on with my former life. So in the span of 6 months, I left my job, I left my husband, I left my house, I left my plans, my money. I went back to my parents' home with whatever I could fit in my car, and without knowing how I was going to earn a living. All I knew is how I didn't want to waste my life. And what I knew is I wanted to contribute to a better world, and I wanted to create whatever I could, even though, we never know how long we have on this earth. But I said, okay, whatever time I have left, I want to put it in good use. So what I did is I went mostly to the US to study, mindfulness in UCLA, and hypnosis in New York, and then neuroscience. I did some courses on neuroscience and psychology at MIT, a number of studies that I undertook. And then at the same time, for 10 years, I will go back to India and Nepal to keep studying with Tibetan lamas. So I will stay for 2 or 3 months at each year, learning with them. And then that's how I started my new life.
Wow, that's thank you for all of that detail. And I deeply, deeply resonate with what you said back there about this not feeling like your home. And I know a lot of our listeners and watchers feel the same way too. And I almost think it's a gift, because it's like a clue. Most of us forget when we come into this iteration of our soul's journey. A lot of us forget that we came from somewhere else but the minority of us that do remember, that longing and understanding of where did we come from, and missing home, but not understanding what home is so, it's such a felt sense. I really deeply, deeply resonate with that, and also with your deconstruction and all of the process that you have to go to, and that realization of recognizing that you can't live in the unconscious world conscious, you just can't do it. And so thank you for going into so much detail. You wrote this beautiful, beautiful book, The 7 Levels of Wisdom, A Path
yes,
to
this
Fulfillment.
is the one.
Yes, thank you.
It will be easier to remember.
Yes. So why don't we give a baseline to the audience about what this book is about, and then I have some specific questions about the content in the actual book.
Well, I think it's very important to understand that you cannot behave in a different way if you don't have that a certain level of consciousness. So we have to understand that we all go through different levels of consciousness. Sometimes, very rarely in one lifetime, we go through several during one lifetime, but the whole range, the 7 levels, we only go through many, many lifetimes. I remember the Dalai Lama used to tell us, it takes eons of time to be able to get enlightened. So in a way, I describe what are those levels of wisdom that we need to go through to be able to have a good map. Because it's like, okay, I can identify where I am and where are the things and where are the levels I need to go through to be able to reach the highest. And we are all called here to reach the highest. For me, that is graduation. And if we see Earth as a school, we go through different courses, the different years, and then at the very end, we are able to graduate. But we cannot go from kindergarten to a master's degree. You need to go through every single course. And that's why we are here. We go through all the courses and we have to learn many lessons. We have to integrate those lessons. And as we go up on the ladder, so to speak, then our worldview changes, our self-perception changes, our actions based on our moral reasoning also changes. And the filter through which we see the world changes. And we can make all that evolve in a conscious way, or we will do it unconsciously, and then it will take longer because this is the free will. We are free to choose the pace, but we will all end up in the same place, which is graduating for this school and be ready for the next school, I guess.
Right. I mean, we either leave here with a PhD or a bachelor's, it just depends on how much consciousness we are able to intake and acknowledge. Thank you for explaining that. One thing that you talked about at the beginning of the book was adding an additional point to the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy, a 6th point. And so I think most people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, but that 6th point, I was wondering if you could explain why you would want to add that into the mix and why it would be important for somebody trying to attain wisdom and consciousness in their development.
I think it's a pity that this is not widely explained and outlined, because he did discover that in the last 3 years of his life. I'm talking about Abraham Maslow, but it was not. It has not been widely spread, and he just realized at the very end of his life that it was not enough to become self-actualized. It was the next step is being self-transcendent. And it's really a way above that, because yes, you can be, when you become self-realized, it means that you know what your talents are, and you're not wasting your life. You are just becoming the best you can be on this earth. But I would say in a material way, it's like you become very successful and you become very conscious of what your talents, your gifts are, and you employ them in your personal and in your professional life, which is great. But I think it's not enough. And that's what he discovered. He discovered that we are here to transcend the ego, transcend the self, and to be able to unite somehow with all human beings, and understanding that there's a kinship among all of us. And we need to realize that, because only when we do that, we change the consciousness of the planet. And I think we are at a point right now where we have to understand that what we need, the change we need, is not a change in institutions. It's not even a change in people in leadership positions. It's a change of consciousness. And at least we need to have that minority that will make the change, because we're still a minority on this path. But I think we need to reach the critical mass where the change will happen. Whether everybody is ready for it or not, that doesn't matter. It will happen. And it will happen only because us individuals will be committed to that change. And this is an evolution of consciousness that we are all called to do, because the planet is changing, is shifting. And whether we are ready or not, that will be our own choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. And I do think to the self-transcendence it feels like it's the PhD level, like it's that other place that we get to. And a lot of us, I think, who go on the path of self-development and enlightenment, you recognize that there is always more opening for consciousness and more expansion to understand our disconnection and to each other and how we're interrelated. And like you said, this consciousness shift has to happen on the individual level, so that we can impact the global masses. So I love that you said that. One thing I was really struck by in the book as well, which you talk about a lot, is the idea of awakening and leaving the matrix. And I think a lot of spiritual people recognize the Matrix movie as a metaphor of what we're experiencing and the illusion and delusion of what life is. And sometimes it's hard for people who are, I think, at the beginning of their experience to really understand that. But for me, I think when I was beginning my awakening and I started like realizing that there's so many people asleep. There's so many sleepwalkers that are so like zombie-like in consciousness. And like you mentioned at the beginning of your introduction, we are all fed this narrative of like, grow up, get married, get a job, have children, follow this very simplified path that is standardized for everyone, and we can get lost in the unconsciousness. So I wondered if you could maybe speak a little bit more about awakening and leaving the matrix and what that actually means for you.
I think it's not different. It's just saying or using the metaphor of the matrix is like a modern version of samsara that Buddhists talk about, or Maya that in Hinduism is very prevalent. They have understood that for centuries and centuries. So it's nothing new. It's
Right.
just that we are just putting it in modern terms so people will relate to it more easily in our Western society. The only difference is that. And I think the Matrix, the movie, is a very good movie. I would put away all the violence and all that, all the excessive action, but the message is very clear. And I think people can relate to it very easily, which is, okay, we are here to awaken. So we have to choose whether we want the red pill or the blue pill. And if we choose to have that blue pill, then we will keep as sleepwalkers, as you well said. We will keep acting like robots. We just comply with whatever the expert will tell us to do, or whatever our authority will tell us to do. We will not even question. We just follow the crowd. We don't want to be different. We just want to be sheep-like, and we are just going all together. And you have no choice and no sovereignty over your life, your mind, your body, over anything. It's just programmed, and you use your free will to be determined by the programming, which is not necessary at all. Of course, we are all programmed since we arrive in this reality. Since we are children, we are told what to do, how to think, how to dress, how to speak. And now with social media, this is even multiplied tenfold or 100-fold. So we are programmed. This is the beginning. It is what it is. It doesn't mean that we have to be determined by that programming. We can choose. And this is the first awakening. The first awakening is, okay, I am living in a reality that is just a simulation. I have chosen to be here. So it's not like I am punished to be here. Some people feel that way, and understandably so. But it's not true. Our soul, our consciousness chose to be here prior to our incarnation. Why? Because we come to learn certain lessons. And this is such a difficult environment that those lessons are very precious, very difficult to get, and very precious because of that. So somehow we are a diamond. but we have forgotten that we are that diamond because
Right.
it's hidden under so many layers of coal that we don't know, we forgot. So we need that pressure. The pressure of being, for me, is more than a school. It's like a boot camp. It's so difficult here. So we need that pressure to be able to take out, to let that diamond emerge from within. And that's why we are here. So if you don't do it consciously, it doesn't mean you are not going to do it. You will do it at some point, but it will not be in this lifetime. And some people, I mean, not everybody has come to be able to awaken in this life. And this is okay, because even the ones that we think that we are ready to completely awaken and get enlightened soon, whatever it is soon, we have gone through so many lifetimes we don't remember. So it only means that we are more like old souls, so to speak. We have gone through more experiences, and some other people need more experiences because they haven't been here for such a long time. So we have to be patient with those sleepwalkers. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to set boundaries. If those sleepwalkers become toxic, you have to. But I think it's important to do it from the compassion point of view, instead of getting angry with them because they don't understand, they don't want to wake up. Well, it is the prerogative to choose when they wake up and when they don't.
Yeah, gosh, you said so many beautiful things back there. One thing that I recognized in my experience when I started awakening that I thought was so pivotal is I was also raised Catholic, and so there was always this idea of a future state where I would be rewarded for my work here and my humility and my service. And when you go on the awakening path and you run across the Buddhist texts, the Hindu texts, they're constantly pointing you to this moment, which is right in front of us. And I realized for the longest time, I was never living in the present moment. And my life was always some future place that I would maybe get to where I could be content and happy and like everything would be okay. And even further afield would be heaven. Like, could I die and go to heaven? And I remember thinking about that experience and breaking out of that unconsciousness, because in some ways Western religion has kept people stuck in that mentality because they're pointing to something that isn't in this moment. And it's just really wild to me that we do that. And in some ways, that's like one of the big ways to break out of the matrix, is to come back into this present moment and realize that like this life is so precious and it's so fleeting. Like you said, we don't know how long we're going to be here. So we must, live it to its fullest degree as best as possible. One of the things you addressed, which I really appreciate that you put this in the book, was spiritual bypass, which I think is something that a lot of us experience once we get on this path and we start feeling good and we start feeling like positive about things and we get in touch with like a lot of people who are optimistic and you let go of the garbage and in some ways you're lighter, but then that can turn into, like an identity. But you said something that in relationship to not falling asleep to our shadow, you said, if taking a spiritual path serves us to keep avoiding deeper issues, then our development will be arrested at some point. So I wondered if you could say some more about that.
Yes, as you said, there are so many people already on a spiritual path that are not courageous enough to look at their shadow and to be able to heal the wounds. And I think it's very dangerous because you think you are more evolved than you are. And then you put all the things that you don't like, you put them under the rug. And then there's a point where that stinks. And it's going to leak somewhere, in areas that you don't know. And you know why things are not as good as you would like. And you start sabotaging yourself, or you start creating problems and conflicts with people. So it's important to understand that if we don't heal our wounds, then we will look at the world through the filter of our own wounds. And that's very dangerous because then you will be reacting to something that is happening right now, but you're not reacting to that. You're reacting to whatever you have not healed yet.
Right.
You are kind of having emotions that are not related to the present moment and the present situation. You are just going back to when you were a child, for example, and you were criticized by your father. And then if someone says something, maybe the person is not criticizing you, it's just having a different opinion. And then you overreact. But you don't know why you are doing it, because you are so used to do it. And you don't question yourself. And it's important to do that. It's important to heal your wounds. It's important to question yourself. It's important to look at yourself from the outside and be honest. Be honest with yourself. You don't have to tell everyone else, but just be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't recognize your weaknesses, the weaknesses will dictate unconsciously your life. So we have to do that. There's no way around it. And sometimes it's very unpleasant, because it's like, okay, I thought I already overcame that. And it's like, okay, I worked through that in that retreat and this and that. But there are so many layers, and we have to go one by one. And it's only when you take the ones that are more superficial that you get to the core ones. And it's never pleasant, but it gives you a lot of freedom. It gives you the freedom to continue your path without burdens, and mostly unconscious burdens. And as I said, whatever you have not looked at will be there and will be contaminating all areas of your life without your knowledge, and even getting you sick, because you don't know why. And it's like there's a message from your unconscious mind, and the sickness is just the messenger. So I will say that when you have sicknesses, is the last straw. It's like, okay, life will whisper to you first, but if you don't listen, then they will shout. And then at the very end, they will just hit you in the face. So it's best to look at it when the life is just whispering, rather than waiting for the final one, And sometimes it will take you to have a big crisis and even hit rock bottom. And only then you are willing to look at that and make changes. So it's up to us. We can evolve and develop ourselves consciously by will. So, okay, I want to do it willingly, or we can do it reluctantly, and then life will force us to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're speaking as something that's so universal and also counterintuitive when we go on this journey of spirituality and personal development and healing, which is the cross section of this entire podcast, is the fact that, like, number one, we're so close to ourselves. So sometimes we accidentally bypass because we're so close to our pain that we can't see it clearly. But then also the counterintuitive idea that, like, addressing the pain directly is actually easier, but the more we avoid it, the harder it gets. And so that counterintuitive idea, I think a lot of us come along this journey and realize that resistance to dealing with the things that trip us up or cause us internal pain and separation from ourselves and from other people, we really do need to address it. And it's just so interesting to me that we all end up doing that a little bit on this path.
Right. And I have seen a lot of people using meditation as a bypass.
Yes.
And that we have to be very aware of it. Meditation is a tool to get to higher ground. First to quieten your mind, and then to go to a higher ground of being instead of of doing. But I have seen people using that to be able to be at peace, I would say peace, quote unquote, to be able to go on with their lives without doing their inner work and not feel too bad about it. Because, okay, as long as I meditate, I can deal with things, so I can still put more things under the rug.
Right.
I don't need to face them because I'm not too uncomfortable. Or I'm not uncomfortable enough to take the step ahead.
Yes.
And I think it's a very dangerous thing. We have to be very aware not to do it. Because that's the path of least resistance, but it doesn't mean it's the wholesome path. We have to be very aware of that.
Yeah. At one point in my journey, I feel like I went through this very tumultuous time where you were talking about there, where I was like hitting rock bottom. And I remember just like speaking to, the universe, divine spirit, whatever you guys, whatever anyone wants to call it, and saying, I don't want to learn this way. Like, I will start listening to the whispers. And I kept saying, like, I want to learn actively, the things that are impairing me in this moment, but I don't want to learn through so much tumultuousness. And it was almost like in that conversation, my consciousness was also able to open up and see more clearly about how I was impeding myself in those moments of, I would say, pain and unlearning and all of those things. And I think we don't also have to do it the hard way either. I learned that, you can see something for the first time that needs addressing, and you don't have to wait until, like you said, it stinks or it becomes a huge pile. You can proactively and lovingly and compassionately hold that space for yourself. So I love that you said that, Monica. I did want to talk to you about the ego, which is like one of my favorite things to talk about. When I got into Buddhism and it was like, kill the ego, like, let's get rid of the ego, I was like, yes, let's do that. I wanted to understand from your perspective, why is it important for us to disidentify with the ego through our growth and evolution, but specifically spiritually? Why is it important for us to disidentify with it? And then I think in the book you do mention that we do need it to some extent. So if we can talk about that nuance.
I think it's the biggest obstacle for spiritual development, at least for spiritual enlightenment.
Yes.
So I call it the big dictator. It's really a dictator within us. And the ego is that part of the mind, is the mind, really. And the mind and the ego, I will use it in like
interchangeably.
Interchangeably, exactly. So the ego will always look for the immediate results. The ego is always wanting pleasure and sensory wellness. The ego is always wanting to be superior or feeling a victim of circumstances. The ego is always comparing, competing, thinking that there is scarcity, and if I don't get ahead, someone else will do it. And the ego is always obsessively thinking about survival. It's like, I need to survive and my survival is in danger. It's just, it goes with the software. So I don't think we should kill the ego, because it goes with the software of being human, of incarnating in a body here in 3D, in the third dimensional earth. So you cannot live without it. It's something that it goes with it. It's part of the game. It's part of the rules. So we don't choose the rules. We choose to come here or not coming here. But once we are here, this is the way it goes.
Right.
So the ego allows you to make some decisions, but you have to be and take care of the security. So I will say should be the boss, the chief of security. The problem is we have promoted the ego to be the CEO of our company.
Right.
So the ego should not be making the big decisions. It should always be there to protect ourselves, not to die until we have to die, until we have to leave the body. But it should be there just to, let's say, to do the daily routine things, to be able to manage ourselves in this world. But it's just a tool. It's just a servant of the soul, of consciousness. It can never be the chief. And the problem is we have promoted it to be the CEO in every single undertaking. So we have to make a shift there. And the one in charge should always be our consciousness, our essence, our being. But of course, it's very difficult, because in our society, what is rewarded and promoted is to have a big ego. So it takes a lot of willingness and inner work to be able to turn this around.
I think also too with the ego is it blinds us so much with that like pleasure seeking, with that security seeking, with that overinflated sense of self-esteem, and being able to create, you know, an identity that makes us feel good about ourselves, but actually isn't really grounded in anything real. And like you talked about our core consciousness and our core essence of who we are, to even understand that there's something underneath who we are as a human that transcends this time and space and is eternal. I think that's a huge thing for people to understand. And we, if we can, we should start from that place, I think, right?
Yes, because what happens with the ego is only looking for something that will get immediate pleasure, but it will never look for your well-being in the medium term and the long term. It
Right.
doesn't care, you know. And this is what really matters. It's like, okay, where are we going towards? The ego doesn't care about the meaning of life. The ego doesn't care about transcending yourself. The ego doesn't care about being infinite, because the ego feels very finite. The ego feels very small, very petty, and that's why it has to fight with others, because the ego thinks, okay, if I don't fight and struggle and I don't compete, I'm just going to be extinct. And that's the
Exactly.
biggest fear of the ego. And it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to talk to the ego as if it was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's like, just calm down. It's not a big deal. No one is going to kill you. Everything is going to be fine. We are living in a not in a hostile environment, or not in a hostile universe. This is a benevolent universe, and the universe is taking care of us all the time. You don't need to be in control. You don't need to have all the securities and all the certainties of everything, because that's not how life works. So don't try to do that, wasting your life. Just
Mm-hmm.
be trustful, and of course, behave or take action whenever you need to take action, and then learn through wisdom not to take action sometimes, and when it's good to do it, and when it's good just not to do anything, and go with the flow. So
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for no action. I am advocating for, okay, this is the river of life. Go towards the stream. Don't fight trying to go upstream, because it is not going to work. You're going to exhaust yourself, and you're not going to get anywhere. So it's like, okay, don't resist. Just accept what you cannot change, because he will take you where you need to go. Even if the ego thinks, okay, this is not what I wanted to go, this goes against my plans, and then this is going to be damaging for myself. You don't know. The ego doesn't know anything about the big picture. It's only very, very, very small point of view. So we need to remember that, to remind ourselves, okay, even if you don't feel in control, it doesn't matter. Life with a capital L is in charge. You don't need to be in charge, and everything is gonna be okay. So, like a small child, it's like tranquilize the ego.
Yes, like you said, it is, it's a tyrant, it's fragile, and it's finite. And if you can think about it like that in those terms, you can address it from like, I think, a very self-led space. One thing that you also talk about in the book, which I love, was seeing perfection in everything. I think along my journey as well, because of how I grew up in my religious experience and always looking for the next thing. The idea of contentment in Buddhism really shifted my entire perspective of what mattered, what I valued, how I found peace, how I cultivated peace within my life. So for you, in this chapter, what are you talking about? What are you pointing to when you say seeking perfection in everything?
I think we have to change our outlook in life. And this is when you change your glasses, your lenses, and you don't look through the ego, you look through the essence, through the being, through consciousness. You can appreciate that everything is perfect. You look at nature, and you don't have there's nothing that is not perfect in nature. After spring, you have the summer, and then autumn, and then winter, and everything goes in a state of flow, in pure perfection. Animals know what to do to be able to
Mm-hmm.
survive, and they know when they have to leave this planet.
Without resistance.
Without resistance whatsoever. It's like, okay, everything is perfect. So why on earth we think that our life is not perfect if we are not in control? It's just a
Mm,
lack of wisdom. And I think as you go up the ladder of evolution, of development, you get more and more pieces of the puzzle. And I think you only get all the pieces of the puzzle when you are at the very top, when you are graduating or you have already graduated and you are out of this earth. And then you have all the
right.
pieces. And it's like, all right, now it makes sense. And that happens because of this. And this had to happen. So it will affect this person. This person will affect the other one. It's a ripple effect. And I had to go through this because I had to learn this lesson. But of course, when you're in the middle of it, it's very difficult to see it. Because we also go through the veil of forgetfulness when we incarnate here. So we
Yeah.
don't know why we incarnated here. We don't know the lessons we came to learn. We don't know who we have to meet or what kind of circumstances we have to go through. And we don't know where it's going to take us. We don't remember anything. So it's like playing blindfold. It's like,
Mm,
but it doesn't mean that we cannot play. It's not an easy game, but we have the tools, we have the instruments, we have our inner guidance. And when you follow that inner guidance, you will go where you need to go in perfect timing. You will
mm-hmm.
meet who you have to meet without making any extra effort. And you will have everything you need to do that. Maybe not everything you want, but not everything you desire right now, but everything you need will be given to you. So
Mm-hmm.
when you are able to accept that with humility and I would say faith or trust, then you live in a state of flow. You don't have conflict with life. You don't have conflicts with others because you know that everyone is at the perfect place. They are doing their best, and so are you. So in a way, you live in harmony, and
Yes.
that's the best way to live life. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think it's feasible.
It takes practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, I'm mindful of the time here as we get ready to wrap up. So I want to give you some space to tell people some of the work that you do. I don't know if you have any upcoming events. I know you do coaching and also like personal development with people. So I'm going to pass it back to you to let people know how they can work with you, what you have going on in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Krista.
Mm-hmm.
I am involved right now. I'm finishing a documentary on awakening, but it's for the time being, it's only going to be in Spanish. So we'll see what I
Okay.
do in English in that respect. But I do work on one-on-one basis with people, helping them transform their lives and guiding them as they need. I have my new book that we said, the 7 Levels of Wisdom, and as you said, and you were very kind. There is a lot of things, a lot of elements that people can dive into, and I think it can be helpful for people that are on a spiritual path and they really want to continue their evolution. And I do have a YouTube channel. I have 2 YouTube channels, one in Spanish and one in English, and I think if people look for it with my name, they will find that. My website is myname.com
Mm-hmm.
altogether, my name and surname, monicaesgueva.com. And I guess if people want to continue their evolution, there are so many tools. YouTube, I upload free content, and the book is a cheap one. So I don't think they have to spend a lot of money if they want to continue progressing. If I can give them a hand or guide them in whatever I can, I will be happy to.
Yeah, and I will put all of those links in the show notes. And please, when your documentary is done, let me know so I can also put that in the show notes. We can put captions on YouTube now in any language, so I'm sure people can watch it that way as well. So that's wonderful. And
Thank you,
also
Krista.
thank you I think it's great that you're also bilingual. My Spanish is so rusty. I wish we could have done a Spanish version of this episode as well, but I try to be mindful about that on my on my personal social media. I translate everything to Spanish and French just so that,
Wow.
I mean, this work requires us to reach more people, right? And I think with you being able to speak Spanish and be able to reach Spanish speaking people is enormous. Like your impact is so huge. So I really appreciate that you're mindful of that as well, like providing both of those languages. It's such a huge thing. So thank you for doing that. I always like to end in gratitude with my guests and kind of check in with them about what 3 things they're grateful for that's sort of rattling around in their heart center today.
Well, I will say very quickly, I'm always very grateful for my husband. I found after many years of heartache and difficult relationships, one day out of the blue, the universe put me in contact. He was in a different continent, and I was in a very magical way. So I will give this to people when they think maybe I will never find a person I can really share my path with. You never know. So if it has to happen, it will happen. You don't have to do anything. And that happened to me. And I have a wonderful partner right now. I'm always very grateful that I am at this point in evolution so I can help others. And I have been given the opportunity of doing this. And every time I do a session with someone, I'm always very grateful, because like, okay, this person is opening their vulnerabilities, their lives, their concerns, and they're just asking for help. And I feel honored to be able to help them. So I'm always grateful for that. And I'm very, very grateful that we are at this very moment here on Earth. It's not a particularly easy time. It's challenging for all of us, but at the same time, we are on the brink of seeing the new Earth, of building the new Earth, of creating the new Earth. And we are going to see what is going to be a wonderful, wonderful world. So I think I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing the work and for staying committed to it. Like you said at the top, it's not easy. We're still a minority. Everyone who goes on this path knows how difficult it is to break away from the mainstream, to light your own path, to create your own steps in this world. So I really appreciate that you've honored your own path and have given all of your work to the collective so that we can create that new earth. And I'm so appreciative of you being here, and thank you for your time and your wisdom and everything, Monica. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista, for the opportunity. It's lovely to be here today.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Ziomara, in alignment with Light Casting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.